Hello there! The story you're about to hear is from the book called God is Interested and Loves Us All. The name of the story is Who is a Good Person?
We have heard it said throughout Thailand that every religion teaches people to be good. Does God, the being who created everything in the world, think the same? So, who is a good person from the viewpoint of God? Since the time that God caused the people to move to different places throughout the world, about 800 years had passed by. At that time, God chose a group of people to be His people. One day, His chosen people were traveling and then stopped to stay at the foothills of a mountain called Mount Sinai. Then God came down on Mount Sinai. The skies thundered and flashed with lightning. The sound of a very loud horn grew louder and louder. The mountain shook as if it was going to explode. The people that were near the base of the mountain were extremely afraid. However, there was a man who wasn't afraid. His name was Moses. Moses revered and honored God. Moses then climbed the mountain to meet with God. During the time that he was on the mountain, God gave him several commandments to give to the people. The reason that God gave the commandments to the people was that if a person could obey every one of the commandments, then God would accept that person. In other words, that person would be a good person in His eyes. But in all reality, there isn't a single person that is able to obey those commandments, because a person must always totally obey the commandments in their hearts and minds, as well as their outward behavior. God gave 613 commandments to Moses for the people to follow. The following 3 commandments are just a sample of those commandments. One commandment is that God wants everyone to honor their father and mother. Many people would think that obeying this commandment would be very easy. But truly, there isn't a single person able to follow this commandment every minute, every second of the day. Some people might honor their father and mother through their lips and outward actions, but in their hearts, they are not truly honoring their father and mother. God considers that that person didn't obey this commandment. To put it another way, that person has sinned against his father and mother as well as God. God sees that that person is not a good person, and God will not accept them. Another commandment is that God doesn't want people to worship the different things that God created, or the different things that man makes. He also doesn't want mankind to worship other gods because God is the creator of mankind. He loves mankind very much. Therefore, He wants people to worship Him and Him alone. If a person worships those other things instead of Him, God sees it as that person isn't revering and honoring Him. In other words, they are committing a sin against God. That person is not a good person, and God will not accept them. Another commandment is that God forbids people to murder another person. Some people might think that following this commandment would be very easy too. But God teaches us that if a person hates another person, then from the viewpoint of God, that person has murdered the other person in their heart. God holds that person as having sinned against Him. In other words, that person is not a good person from the perspective of God, and He will not accept them. God desires for mankind to know that there isn't a single person that is a good person, because every person does wrong. Every person commits sins against God. In other words, every single person is a sinner. This is the reason that God gave the commandments to mankind. The commandments are like a gauge to show people how good they are. If a person is good in every aspect and at all times, God will accept that person. But in reality, there isn't a single person who is completely good in every aspect and at all times. The reason that God gave the commandments to mankind was because He desires for people to realize that they need to depend upon Him in order for that person to be acceptable to Him.
Thanks so much for listening. We hope that you have enjoyed this story as well as the other stories. If you have any questions, or you would like to know more about the teachings of God, please feel free to contact us.